All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling something I think a lot of us struggle with, becoming more fluent and confident speaking English. We're going way beyond like your typical vocab lists and grammar rules.
Exactly. We're looking at what actually works for English learners based on their real experiences, those like aha moments they have.
Yeah, I think we've all had that experience of trying to have a conversation and our brain just gets stuck translating
Right.
and you feel like you're always a step behind.
Absolutely. That constant translation thing is like this delay,
Mhm.
and it really holds you back from being fluent. But the cool thing is that when you can think directly in English, that delay just vanishes and you can be so much more fluent.
So no more mental gymnastics, huh? Sign me up. But how do we actually like rewire our brains to think in English?
Well, one method that's surprisingly helpful is actually labeling everyday objects with their English names.
Wait, so you mean like sticking labels on everything? That sounds a little intense.
It might sound simple, but there's real science behind it. When you see those labels all the time, you start to directly connect the object and the English word. And that actually rewires your brain and makes it easier to remember.
So I guess it helps you break that habit of translating in your head, right?
Exactly. Instead of having to translate, you just see the object and think refrigerator because you've built that direct connection.
That's pretty interesting. But wouldn't it feel weird at first? Like forced?
It might for a bit, but that goes away pretty quickly. Over time, it just becomes second nature. You're literally rewiring your brain without even realizing it.
Wow. So what's another technique that people have found helpful?
Another good one is to focus on thinking in simple sentences, even if you're tempted to try and make these big, complicated thoughts.
Really? I always thought I should aim for the most complex sentences I could.
It's actually much more effective to start simple, like, I am hungry, or the book is on the table.
Ah, so it's like building a foundation.
Exactly. Those simple sentences become the building blocks. And as you get more comfortable with those, you can start putting them together in more complex ways. It's a process, but you end up with much stronger fluency.
That makes a lot of sense. It seems a lot easier to handle than jumping right into complicated sentences.
Yeah, and you can do it anytime, anywhere. Just make an effort to put those simple English sentences into your thoughts, even if you're just narrating what you're doing.
So like instead of thinking I need to wash the dishes, I could think I'm washing the dishes in English.
Exactly. You're training your brain to use English grammar and sentence structure more and more. And this kind of leads into another technique that a lot of learners really like. It might sound a little silly at first, but it really works.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Talking to yourself in English.
Oh, wow, yeah. I'm definitely caught myself doing that before, like when I'm cooking or cleaning.
And that's a great way to practice. It's like having your own personal English tutor who's always there.
I see. So by talking to myself, I'm creating this space where I can practice and not worry about making mistakes.
Exactly. There's no pressure to be perfect. You can try out different phrases, work on your pronunciation, and just get comfortable with speaking. It's like this judgment-free zone where you can really have fun with the
I
language.
like that. It's like turning your everyday activities into these English practice sessions.
And it's incredibly effective because you're actively using the language instead of just listening or reading. You're really putting it into practice.
This is all great stuff. I'm already feeling inspired to give it a try.
That's great to hear. And remember, it's about finding what works best for you and doing it consistently. The more you practice, the more fluent and confident you'll become, and the more natural it'll feel to think in English.
It's like this snowball effect, right?
Exactly. The more you practice, the better you get and the easier it becomes. And as you get more comfortable thinking in English, you'll find all sorts of new ways to use it.
So it's not about reaching some unattainable goal of fluency. It's about changing your mindset and making English a part of your everyday life.
Exactly. And that's what we'll explore in more detail as we continue this deep dive. We'll look at exactly why thinking in English is so important for bridging the gap between understanding the language and actually speaking it fluently.
This is all really insightful. I can't wait to hear more.
It's funny, a lot of learners really focus on learning new words and all the grammar rules, and those are definitely important, but they're not the whole picture.
Yeah, it's true. It's like having all the ingredients for an amazing meal, but you don't know how to cook. You could have a huge vocabulary, but still not be able to actually speak.
Right. And that's where thinking in English comes in. It's like that missing link between knowing the language and being able to use it.
Okay, I really want to understand this better.
Hmm.
What difference does thinking in English actually make to fluency?
Well, think of it like this. When you're always translating in your head, it's like you've got this filter that's slowing everything down.
It's like a mental roadblock.
Exactly. And that roadblock makes you hesitate, makes you less confident. But when you think in English, it's like that filter disappears, your thoughts can flow freely.
So it's not just about how quickly you can speak. It's about feeling more natural and confident, too.
Exactly. It helps you react more quickly in conversations, express your ideas more clearly, and just connect better with the language and the people you're talking to.
I get it. It's like finally riding a bike without training wheels, right? Suddenly you have all this freedom.
That's a great analogy. That feeling of freedom and confidence, that's what it's all about. And the amazing thing is the more you think in English, the more you realize how much you actually know and what you can do with the language.
Like unlocking some secret potential you didn't even know you had.
Absolutely. It's about that change in mindset from I'm learning English to I am an English speaker.
That's a big difference. And I think the techniques we talked about really help make that shift happen, like labeling things, thinking in simple sentences, even talking to yourself. It all trains your brain to think in English.
And the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, it just happens without you even thinking about it.
That's the dream, right? To just speak effortlessly.
It is. And you can totally get there if you're willing to put in the work. It's a journey, but it's so worth it.
I'm curious, is there anything else about thinking in English that really stands out to you?
You know, what's really fascinating to me is how thinking in English can actually change how you see the world around you.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting. How so?
Well, every language has its own unique way of describing and understanding the world. English, for example, has specific words and grammar structures that affect how we think about things like time, space, and relationships.
So you're not just learning a new language, you're almost learning a new way of thinking.
Exactly. It's about tapping into this whole different cultural and mental framework.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like opening up a whole new way of seeing things.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the coolest things about language learning. It helps you grow and see things from a different perspective.
This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening. I'm seeing fluency in a whole new light. It's not about speaking perfectly or knowing every rule. It's about training your brain to think in English and embracing that new perspective.
That's a great way to put it. It's about making English part of who you are, not just a skill you're trying to learn.
So how can we help our listeners make that shift and really commit to thinking in English?
I think it starts with awareness. Pay attention to those moments when you're translating in your head. Think about how it feels. Is it slowing you down? Does it disconnect your thoughts from your words?
It's like becoming more aware of your own thought process so you can see where you can improve.
Right. And once you're aware of it, you can try out the techniques we talked about and see what works for you. It takes some trial and error, but it's worth it.
It's all about figuring out your own learning journey and finding what works for you.
And don't forget to have fun. Learning a language should be enjoyable. The more you enjoy it, the more likely you are to keep going and see results.
So it's not about being perfect. It's about enjoying the process and making progress.
Absolutely. And as we go on with this deep dive, we'll talk about even more tips and strategies to make that journey easier and more fun.
I can't wait to hear more. This is such valuable information for anyone who wants to improve their English. So we've talked about all the science behind this and how it affects fluency, but how can our listeners actually use this, in their everyday lives? How do they actually start thinking in English?
Well, it's really about finding ways to use English more actively. So instead of just passively listening or reading, actually use the language to express yourself, even if it's just to yourself.
I like that. So it's not just about taking in information. It's about creating something with it, even if nobody else sees it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where those techniques we talked about come in, like labeling things around you. That's a really great way to strengthen those connections in your brain and make those English words come to you more easily.
It's like turning your whole world into this English learning experience, right?
Exactly. And thinking in those simple sentences, even if it feels too easy, it's a great way to get your brain used to English grammar and sentence structure. Like we said, it's about building that foundation.
And what about self-talk?
Yeah.
Honestly, that one's a little scary for me. I don't think I'm ready to have full conversations with myself out in public.
Oh, yeah, I get it. And you don't have to do anything that feels uncomfortable. Self-talk can be as easy as just saying what you're doing while you're cooking or getting ready or even just walking down the street.
So just finding little moments throughout the day to switch to English in your head.
Exactly. And the more you do it, the easier and more natural it becomes. It's like working out a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
I like that analogy. It's like a mental workout for English. So besides all these specific techniques, what's your best general advice for someone who's just starting to think in English?
I think the biggest thing is to be patient. It's a process. It takes time and it takes effort. Don't beat yourself up if you find yourself switching back to your native language sometimes. Just gently bring your thoughts back to English and keep practicing.
It's about progress, not
All
perfection.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And don't forget to celebrate the small wins. Every time you realize you're thinking in English without even trying, that's awesome. Take a moment to appreciate that.
I bet the more you do that, the more you'll want to keep going.
Exactly. It keeps you motivated and reinforces that habit. And remember, everyone's different. Some techniques might work better for you than others. Just try things out, have fun with it, and find what you like.
That's great advice. So to sum it all up, if you're serious about becoming more fluent in English, thinking in English is like the secret weapon.
It's the bridge between understanding the language and actually speaking it. And it's about embracing that new way of thinking that comes with learning a new language.
It's been fantastic talking to you about all this. Thanks for all the great insights.
It was my pleasure. And to everyone listening, remember, the world is your English playground. Go out there, explore, experiment, and have fun.
What a great way to put it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll catch you next time.